The sun rises on the 1st of January 867 over a shattered Europe. The centuries following Rome's collapse had not been kind to the continent, and while Charlemagne and his Frankish dominion had seemed at one point a hopeful successor, disease and decades of instability had rendered every count in the known world independent rulers over their small plot of land, including Boilar Caturix Dragoshin of Karashova. Once a subject of Bulgaria, he now finds himself free to rule over his lands immediately upon his succession at the age of 16. Always a militant-minded youth, he rallies his armies against a rival duke, a childhood enemy by the name of Ban Alan Turtur, who now rules Targovishte with imperious malice. Caturix, named after the traditional Dacian god of war, fulfills his namesake with his skill in battle. He rallied around 1,000 men, far more than were willing to fight for Ban Alan, who has to defend with 300 men, even if they are better equipped than the army of Caturix. Leading the army himself into battle, he defeats the Targovite commander, Buza, on the 11th of February. By the 12th of April, Targovishte's meager defenses had fallen, and Ban Alan Turtur was taken prisoner with the rest of his small court who had not yet fled. With his early victory, Caturix became proud and had designs to unite all the Ruman people, perhaps even remake Dacia. As such, he wasted no time taking full advantage of these opportunities for expansion amongst his Romanian neighbors. Meanwhile, the Order of St. Anthony was founded on the 20th of April 867, a military order for the protection of Coptic Christians. On the 17th of January 868, the Turk warlord Sabuk Tigan the Conqueror overtook the Duchy of Gazna with 45,000 tribal warriors. With his neighbors barely able to field 1,000 men, he is destined to be one of history's bloodiest figures. On the 3rd of July 869, Karashova gained access to the Black Sea with the conquest of Bessarabia. Meanwhile, with Caturix conquesting his way around the Balkans, the son of the old king of Bulgaria, named Prince Kresimir, has been attempting to encircle Karashova in the form of his claims on Tarnovo. This comes to a head when Caturix sees that the majority Ruman county of Niš is under his control, and undergoing harsh cultural conversion to Bulgarski. Not having the foresight to otherwise notice his encirclement, Caturix invades Niš with his army, declaring war. In 871, even with Kresimir's evenly matched army, Caturix was able to take Niš and force a peace. Still, it would be long before either people saw a true peace. On his conquests, Caturix found the hand of a saint in the Sredis church, and moved it to the capital Targovishte. In June of 873, after conquering Thessaloniki, Caturix Dragoshin caught consumption. As such, he quickly married, and was betrothed to a courtier's daughter who would soon be of age. With death seemingly on the horizon, Caturix Dragoshin did everything in his power to fortify and ensure his legacy, including consolidating and distributing titles from his conquests, and having himself crowned as Voivod, or King of Moldova. He is coronated on the 13th of December 875, and recovers from his consumption shortly thereafter, earning himself the moniker of the Blessed. In 876, to celebrate, Caturix the Blessed conquered the Duchy of Tarnovo in the middle of his territory, forcing his rival Kresimir to move his capital to the coastal province of Constanta, which is surrounded by Moldova. He later formed Sisnad by changing his main title to a Bulgarski one. Meanwhile, in the court of Caturix the Blessed, he only granted titles above those of mayor and bishop to other Ruman courtiers, despite the established elite being Bulgarski. This would prove to foment great tension in the Moldavian court. In 884, the up-and-coming Catholic power Slavonia conquered half of Sisnad in the northwest, meaning that they bordered Moldova in only the surrounded province of Constanta. Meanwhile, on the 9th of April, having conquered most of Persia, Sabuk Tigan declared himself Sultan of the Ghaznavid Sultanate, an imperial title, the first empire since the collapse of the Byzantines. By February of 886, Moldova reached what could be called its first peak of expansion, where it would remain for the foreseeable future, save for the conquest of Constanta. The world, as a whole, in February of 886, was beginning rapid consolidation in many areas. Beginning in the west, the Spanish kingdom of Asturias was reunited only a few years after the collapse, and now contends with the Moors as the greatest kingdom in Iberia under Rey Louis the Betrayer. In the north, the British Isles are largely falling under the control of the Nordic kingdoms of Northumberland and Insigol, each of their rival kings known as Sinig Berhard the Cleansing Flame and Rig Anbjorn the Cleansing Flame, respectively, both of them Asatru kings ruling over Catholic lands and subjects. The Nordic and French territories were still all largely chaotic. In South German lands, the county of Tübingen looked promising and held the most land in that region by far. The rest were disunited. In Italy, the Duchy of Firenze under Duke of Riligo the Young contested with the Duchy of Pambia under Duca Albano in the Alps. The Nizmadin were raiders based in North Africa, and they held lands in Sicily. The Order of St. Anthony also held lands immediately west of the Nile. Back north, Slavonia and Dalmatia were quickly becoming significant Balkan kingdoms in their own right, but ran up against Moldova, which blocked any expansion east for them. The Slavic Radomichi to the north had conquered the once imposing Magyars, and Novgorod had maintained its own local hegemony even further north. To the south and east lay Hayd, a Georgian and apostolic Christian kingdom, which stood ready to face the great empire of the region, the Sunni Ghaznavids, who seemed rapidly approaching. Finally, the Middle East saw the most consolidation in the form of the unexpected warlord turned Sultan Sabuktigin. A Turk, him and his tribesmen arrived from the east at the most opportune time for their aspirations. They took nearly all of the Persian land by 886, as well as lands east of the Aral Sea and Oman. Now, Sultan Sabuktigin the Conqueror was actually looking east, seeking to expand into India. The only ones who could stop him, and the 33,000 Turk horsemen he still had left, was the Arab Emirate of Al-Shukri, who had 2,000 men and a child emir, which was barely enough for the Sabuktigin to deem them not worth the effort. Occupying the lands of eastern Iraq and the coast on the west of the Persian Gulf, surely they would be next when the bloody Turk turned his gaze west once more. On the 6th of July, 886, Caturix's Belgarsky vassals threatened to rebel if they weren't also made landed aristocracy, and as such King Dragoshan yielded to their demands in the interests of the realm and his exhausted army. He yielded a county to each of the 5 most significant Belgarsky vassal families. In April, a small Tengri revolt in the north broke out, and as soon easily put down by the king's men, who were waiting for the day they were ready to finally take Constanta. November 886 is when that siege would begin, but barely having enough men to siege the province, it would not be taken immediately as was once thought. Then, when the reinforcements came in from the west and started occupying land, the war became a stalemate. Meanwhile, to the east, on the 19th of March 888, another Turkic warlord burst onto the scene with 19,000 men himself, called Seljuk. He came to sudden power in Nishapur, and found himself surrounded on all sides by the bloody Turk, Sabuktigin the Conqueror of the Ghaznavids. These 2 men held the greatest armies in the known world, and their clash would surely snuff out countless souls. On the 23rd of July, 889, Constanta was conquered, but the unhappy Belgarsky vassals erupted in open revolt against the king's 600 remaining men. In 892, Seljuk and Sabuktigin went to war. The war would come to a begrudging end the next year, with Yagbu Seljuk the Vengeful of Khorasan being the first to best the bloody conqueror in the art of war, giving him a taste of his own doom. In February, Astorius founded the Kingdom of Leon out of a union with the fledgling Navarra in order to oppose the growing Moorish threat to the south, the Jabrid. In June of 894, Seljuk the Vengeful conquered into the Pamir Mountains, away from the Ghaznavids, but still surrounded by them. On the 10th of March, King Dragoshan's wife died of slow fever at the age of 26. 8 days later, he would marry a ward of the Apostolic Church, a woman of 22 years named Anush. On the 24th of June, 896, King Caturix has an axe known as the Ravenger forged for himself. In May of 897, Seljuk the Vengeful named himself as Khagan of the Khorasani Empire. On the 15th of January, 899, Caturix delivered his firstborn son, named Alexandru. In December, King Caturix donated to the monks of Mount Athos. On the 9th of September 900, Slavonia declared itself a kingdom under Kral Vukan the Rash. Voivod Caturix was especially careful to steadily improve relations with Slavonia from then on. A second son was born to Caturix on the 15th of February 909, named Cyprian. King Caturix Dragoshan, 58 and aging fast, took to torturing his many prisoners with increased vigor and frequency in his later years. On the 25th of December 909, Sultan Sabuktigin died in battle against Kagan Seljuk, leaving his son Bulan the Just to inherit his vast empire. On the 17th of April, the Ghaznavids shattered, releasing Timratsid and many other smaller kingdoms, ripe for Khorasani conquest. Still, they held land in occasional, irregular, and unimportant locations. On the 1st of February 914, the Ghaznavid Sultanate collapsed entirely, with Bulan the Just taking the lesser title Sultan of Zabolistan. On the 7th of March 914, despite friendly appearances, King Vukan the Rash of Slavonia declared war upon Moldova for Tara de Jus in the north, riding with 5,000 men. Caturix responded with his own 5,000, and an extra 1,000 hired mercenaries in order to rise to victory in this unexpected conflict. The armies met in the Battle of Alba de Jos, Caturix and his 6,000 men spilling from a high mountain pass into the valley below, where Kral Vukan and his 6,000 men were sieging the county's castle. While Caturix manages to defeat and injure Vukan, who flees in the fray of battle, the Moldovich men still lose the day. In a rage, King Caturix buys 11,000 mercenaries to finish the job. This succeeds, and King Vukan would die of his wounds later on. As a result, Pannonia is released, and Kral Dorobomir the Brave inherits his father's kingdom. The war rages on, regardless, and empties the coffers of Moldova. Caturix wins nearly every siege, while Dorobomir wins nearly every battle, which leads to a stalemate that forces King Caturix the Blessed to lead an assault on the Slovenian capital, Zagreb, in the hopes of finally capturing the Kral and ending the war. On the 16th of June, 917, the war ended, and half the treasury was spent trying to win it. Still, Slavonia was also cleaved in two, and Moldova remained whole, so all was well in the end. In 920, the court patriarch Adam the Wise declared a war of revolt against the king for the kingdom of Bulgaria. Meanwhile, Kagan Seljuk was busy gobbling up the rest of the former Ghaznavid land, leaving them a small region east of the Lut Desert. In desperation, Buland even converted to Christianity, East Syriac to be exact. Shortly thereafter, the Ghaznavids would soon be consumed entirely by the Kagan. The grandson of Sabuktigin, Mursal Ghaznavi, would inherit the final province of the Sultanate, Dashti Kipchak, though it would be uncertain for how long he would rule here. To ensure his survival, he got involved with the distant Chinese and their western protectorate. Meanwhile, Cyprian Dragoshin dies of suspicious circumstances at the age of 15 on the 18th of February 924. On the 25th of November 924, King Caturix Dragoshin the Blessed of Moldova died at the age of 73 due to immense stress. The founder of a nation and unifier of a people, he will be remembered as long as the sun rises on Ruman Hills. His son, Alexandru Dragoshin, inherits the throne at the age of 25, an even better general than his father. He married straight away to a woman older than him, barely within childbearing age, at an astounding 38, named Vienka, a German spinster and last daughter of a noble house that her father is overjoyed to marry off. He gifts her the finger of St. John on the day of their wedding, appealing to her Catholic faith.